Well, I was trying to become a rock star, and I ended up discussing rocks instead. So it's a bit of a cosmic joke in there. No, I mean, I think that everybody's born to do something in life, and whether they recognize it earlier on in life, which is very lucky, or whether you learn about it later in life and still get a chance to do it, the effect is still the same. And if I look back in hindsight, I mean, I was drawing pyramids when I was 3, which is a bit unusual for a child that was born in Portugal, which is nowhere near pyramids, and you don't even know what a pyramid is. So obviously something was already, hardwired. But it took me many decades before I got out of the commercial world to finally go and be levitated inside the crop circle, which is not exactly what people kind of do or what they look for when they're studying crop circles. And that really changed my life. I suddenly realized while I was in the middle of all this research that something was very, very important here. Something was going on. And I was also looking at people around me having unusual experiences in these temporary temples, and realized that this story had to be told. And once I published a book and it became an international bestseller, much to my surprise, actually, and it still is considered to be an exemplary piece of work, which so I'm very happy for all those fans around the world. I then decided to look at the crop circles from the point of view of what is that they're trying to teach us. And it turns out that what they're trying to teach us is that they're based on the same principles as ancient civilizations. You know, the stuff that we talk about, the big stones, the megalithic sites. And I put one and one together and realized they're trying to draw attention to a legacy that we've been left here on Earth for over 12,000 years about the cycles of time, about the cycles of change, and also the people who are much more connected to the nature of things that allows us to anticipate potential issues on Earth and somehow ride these moments of cataclysm with stoicism and also elegance and survive them as well. And I figured that was a story that's so empowering. And I had no idea where this was going. I mean, I had to learn all of this from scratch in a way, even though in hindsight, I kind of know what I was doing. Now that I look back on what I've written, it seems very familiar. So that's what really set the whole thing off. I just quit my job. I took a huge leap of faith, went bankrupt, lost my marriage of 14 years, lost my house, my cats, my sports cars. All of that went out of the roof. But the fringe benefits have been so wonderful because I've seen people reacting to things that I have done. I have to say, I have to give credit to whoever's giving me this information, because there's a lot of stuff coming in that I have no idea where it comes from. I just trust the process and I follow it and I research it, and then I prove that this information is actually quite correct. And I see people getting benefits from this, either spiritually or physically or mentally, or even from a healing point of view. And I see things getting better. And I can't think of anything better that I would prefer to be doing, despite all the challenges, that you're going to die one day physically and say, you know, I think I helped to improve things 1% while I was here on the earth. And that's good enough for me. I've made a positive contribution. I'm still trying to do it. I'm still learning the process as I'm going along. So people are kind of following me on this vicarious ride through history. But I see the end result being a great positive to people. So I just continue doing it. So that's kind of how I got involved with it, by being levitated in a crop circle and then watching unusual people coming out of the stones inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. And I wasn't even looking for this stuff. I didn't even know this stuff was even possible. So I'm talking from personal experience, and you can't really beat that, can you?
Right, right. So when you said you were levitated in a crop circle, did you really literally levitate off the ground, or are you talking spiritually levitated?
Oh no, I mean physically.
Wow.
I mean, there was witnesses that actually saw the bump on the back of my head, and still 2 days later. And I'll give you the idea around what was happening. I had been sort of prompted to write a book, which I really didn't want to do. I was quite happy making a lot of money in the commercial world. I didn't want to become a poor author. It was the last thing in my mind, but something was prodding me. And the more I researched, the more I realized I have to learn about physics and metaphysics. I have to learn about all of these things if I want to understand why this incredible phenomenon is here. And there was one roadblock that I had. I couldn't understand why all these anomalies that we're finding, for example, the roots of the plants were bent the wrong way that they're supposed to be doing. Roots tend to go towards the center of gravity, towards the center of the earth. We pulled plants out of the real crop circles, not the man-made stuff, the real stuff. The roots were pointing in the wrong direction. Now, only something that affects gravity can do that. We had iron ferrites in the soil. We had changes to the water structure in the crop circles, but I couldn't understand how all these things fit together. And it was only by just going into one of these things in the middle of the night and saying, what is this really about? How are you people creating these incredible designs? And what's the purpose? And it was at that moment that I felt someone coming around the back of me. And remember, this is in the middle of the night, 11:30 in Wiltshire, in England, inside a crop circle, surrounded by a sea of wheat, nobody around. And I felt someone coming up behind me while I'm lying on the ground with my eyes closed. Someone just hit me with a baseball bat on the back of my neck. And just like, I lost all my sort of trepidation. I was feeling a bit sort of, scared at the time. And there's a big sort of light around me. And I'm not really a great believer in abductions, UFO abductions. I understand they happen, but I'm not really into it. It's not my cup of tea, It's kind of messy. I don't like people probing me around with things. And it was at that moment, it's like this switch just got triggered in one of my muscles. And I just saw my hands floating around me. And I remember even at the time saying, wow, that's interesting, watching my hands floating. And then I realized I couldn't feel the ground. I was actually above the ground. And it was at that moment that the light just went out. And there was 3 people on either side of me, like I was lying flat, but it's a strange angle. It was like I was in 4D. There was 3 people on either side of me looking over me. There was 2 at the bottom, making unusual shapes with their hands, like geometry. And I knew exactly what they were saying. I couldn't hear it, but I could understand it. And it took 45 minutes. And I know this because I had a cassette recorder next to me playing some quiet music. Now, anybody who's under 30, you're going to have to Google cassette recorders because you won't understand what the hell I'm talking about. It was a 45-minute tape, and the click went off, and at that moment, I hit the ground with such a force that I got the bump on the back of my head. Wow. And it was from that moment that I began to write like an idiot. I mean, I couldn't stop writing. This stuff was coming out crazily. And I'm a writer to begin with anyway. Everything was very unstructured, but there was structure to what was coming out. And that's when I realized I've got to basically give this up and and tell people what's going on here. This is incredible. So that's kind of how it happened. And I still remember it as fresh as it was yesterday. And this was over, 25 years ago?
Wow.
So hasn't done much for my hair, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm with you in that respect.
That's a good technique. I'll have to copy that one.
Put on a little chapeau, right? So, you know what? I think that some people just have that happen to them, and a light goes on, and you just are driven from that point. And it's not everybody that has that happen, but I think that everybody can ascend to that at some point, right? And I think that that's what you are trying to show the people is literally, what is going on, what's out there. Pay attention, because these things, literally I was watching one of your seminars, and you were talking about over in the Yucatan, one of the big step pyramids was built, and it was out of phase with everything else slightly, and all of the steps going up were as well, and it was making that sacred geometry spiral, which is the golden mean ratio. I had never realized that before about any structure until you pointed that out. And I've been obsessed with that, for most of my life. When I found what phi was, I realized that's the building block of the universe. And you were the first person that I heard say that after I thought it.
Oh,
and you were talking about that a lot, right?
Yeah, and in fact, the foundation of every genuine crop circle is based on the phi spiral as well. And this goes back to what my research goes into the people, the people we call the gods that were here 12,000 years ago after the flood and before. There was a whole civilization here, according to every indigenous culture on Earth. So they couldn't have been making this up. And they said these people had complete control over the laws of nature. They knew how to apply the laws of nature, manipulate it, and use it for good action. And sometimes for wrong action. I mean, they fell to the same scruples as humans. They said, just because we're more advanced than humans doesn't mean that we don't sort of come under the influence of being here in the three-dimensional world. And we also had problems. I mean, there's people who really misbehaved and took this information to another level and did some very nefarious things with it. And that's what brought the whole catastrophe of the gods down. So this was a lesson for them too. They were not above what we succumbed to in our material world either. So it's kind of reassuring that, we're kind of on the same level of them, even though they knew more than us. But you're right. It was all about the application of the natural laws And it's something that you and I can learn. And in fact, I've been teaching a temple making course for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I even have a DVD to go with it for people who can't afford it, and they can create a portal. And my idea was to, look at the world and say, well, wait a minute, we stopped building temples around the world since the 12th century. I mean, the last time we built temples according to the correct recipe were the Gothic cathedrals in Europe. And look what's happened since then. The total subsidence of society, politics is in complete flux. We can't find leaders that, or they're very rare, that are following a right path of action to help people, rise up above their common problems.
Right.
And I figured, it would be great with all this information I've learned over the years to apply this and teach people how to build their own portal, build their own temple where they live. And it's amazing what the feedback that I'm getting. People are beginning to do it. And if we can get another 1 million people on the grid, I think we're in absolutely great shape.
Well, I think we'll get there at some point. As long as people like you continue doing what you're doing out there, the people are going to start seeing it, find you. And people, look at this whole entire thing that we're doing here, this 5-day event with so many people focused on basically the same intent, to raise the awareness, raise the vibration of the people of this planet a little bit higher. And if we can do that, like you said, if you can affect one person at the end of the day or at the end of your life, you've actually done at least something to be productive for the society, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Gandhi said, and I miss him because he had the best quotes, like, be the change you wish to see, plant your garden and let others look at your garden and say, hey, he's doing a really good thing with his garden. He grows really good vegetables. I think I'll imitate that. And some people will try to burn your garden down, but that's the whole point of Earth. You're never going to fix it permanently. It's a big play school for right and wrong and all the steps in between. And the trick is, how are you going to do this when you're here? Are you going to go with right action or wrong action? There really is no right or wrong. It's how you behave in the end, because it's all a matter of perspective. I mean, anybody who's a dictator thinks that what they're doing is absolutely right. But the trick is, how are you going to behave? How are you going to improve yourself when you leave? And what are you going to leave for others? So it's down to you. It's a personal responsibility in the end. So you just have to be the change. Show by example. We can't all be perfect. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means. I mean, I'm a constant work in progress, and I know it.
Yeah.
And I'm often reminded of it when I post things on Facebook, which I should have thought a little bit more about. And people remind me of this. And I go, actually, they're right. There's some things I should have thought through a little bit more. And it's those moments where you have another aha moment that improve yourself. So the trick is not to beat yourself up over it, because the reason why we're here, we're reincarnated, is because we're not perfect. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. So,
we'd already graduate. We'd be gone.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
You can look from above and go, that looks a bit messy down there. It looks like it hurts. I don't think I'm going to go down there right now.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of, it is that way, but you're right. It is, people don't realize it's not the dichotomy between good and evil. It's the choice of what you were, like you just said, what you choose to do. And, the clergy don't want that to get out there, because in all truth, it doesn't matter whether you're a good person or a bad person. You just need to be and choose that. And if you are a bad person, then unfortunately, you're going to do bad things. And there's going to be people that are going to try and stop you from doing that. But it's the other way around as well.
And here's the funny thing, Leonard, is the fact that, I'm coming in the middle of all of this. I mean, my teachers are people like John Michel, who passed away a few years ago, great writers, great thinkers, Rupert Sheldrake and people like that. People that set people like me on their path. They suddenly appear around the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and there's this incredible upwelling of information and tools that we've been given. Everything since then has mostly just been regurgitated, but the effect is cumulative over time. And I think that I can't think of any other moment in history that we can go back to. Maybe times around the Renaissance in Europe, perhaps, or during the great Arab flourishing in the 4th century. Where they were light years ahead of Europeans who were still eating each other for food.
Yeah.
People don't realize how much we borrowed and stole from the Arab people in Europe. And there is wonderful flourishing, this moment in time, of all the tools that we need at our disposal at a time when all the calendars are reaching their climax, all the ages that have been predicted are reaching their climax, climate change is upon us. We are definitely hitting a milestone in human history, and it's time to evolve. So I feel that we're actually very guided, whether it's people who write books or write documentaries. There's a lot of inspiration going on, and I can't think of any other moment in history where we've all come together to, you know, share these moments and share these inspirations and tools. You know, moments like this, for example, what a great idea, you know,
Right.
to share this with 4,000 people and perhaps more by the time this microphone went on around the world. So, you know, we are a big family and we are well supported at all levels.
Absolutely. And you know that, just like Neil was talking about earlier, when he was doing his when we were all doing the meditation, and he talked about, you know, the coronavirus and how that has allowed some people time to reflect who didn't normally have that time, and then it's forced some people to have time to reflect who didn't really want to spend time
Yeah.
to reflect because they were too busy in their lives doing other things, and it wasn't something they would think about. So, you know, I said that to someone, that I think the best thing that ever happened to this world was the coronavirus, because it's made everyone slow down and think about things for a little bit and reflect. And I, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think in the end, I want to get your opinion on that. What do you think in the end? Do you think we humans are going to make you know, leaps and bounds in a good way, or do you think eventually we're just going to go back to normal? What do you think is going to happen there?
Oh, it's free will down here. Who knows? But I mean, what I can say from the people that I'm involved with, and I'm involved with a particularly interesting group of people who work with the most incredible psychic in Britain, and we have a lot of insights that we know about. And I can't tell you anything about it. I mean, I'm sworn to secrecy because some things, well, because some things have to evolve on their own.
Yep.
You can't influence
Absolutely.
the outcome. You're just aware of what's going on because you're kind of on the periphery, because people in my position have a way to influence things, and you
Yep.
can only influence things to a certain degree. You can't influence things for what you want. You have to
Absolutely.
influence things for the bigger picture. And what's happening is, and what I've learned over time, is that there are circles within circles within circles. The first circle, of course, coronavirus, deadly. Absolutely, it is a very nasty little disease. It's the flu multiplied by 10.
Right.
We've had many of them. We've had SARS, MERS, and the other ERS that are going around.
Right.
But still, you know, the problem is people are dying. 1 million people are already dead. Compared to the flu epidemic of 1918, it's a drop in the bucket, but still people are dead. And even one person is unacceptable in my line.
Right.
But if you just take back to the second circle, you go, wait a minute, look at this dispassionately. What's the big picture here? What are we trying to get? Because everything has a purpose, okay?
Yeah.
And we're not always aware of the purpose because we're so attached to the emotion of the event, you know? If you just move back a little bit, take yourself out of the equation and look at it and give it time, because right now we're in the middle of all of this. It'll be a few more months before things become much more clear. The big picture is, for example, that the world is in trouble. We are overpopulated. We are overstressed. Someone is actually monitoring a level at which the earth tries to recycle its systems of growth relative to the consumption rate. And right now, by the time we reach the end of July, the earth can no longer replenish its systems, okay? So we're now consuming 1.5 Earths every year as a population. That's scary.
It is.
That's insurmountable. So this has led us to understand about climate change. It's led us to understand about what we're doing to the sky. All you have to do is take a plane right now, fly over Lake Michigan into Chicago, as I did a few weeks ago, and look at Chicago from the air and go, I can see Chicago for the first time in 20 years. Why is that happening? Why is the lake turquoise and not brown? Well, because the pollution is no longer there. That means I'm staying at home more. I'm contributing less to pollution. Now, that has a knock-on effect. In Britain, there's a study that was done that said, I think 25% now of people have said, I'm not going to go back to working in an office anymore. I'm going to work from home, teach my children at home. I'm going to adapt a new way of life because they see that their footprint on the planet is unsustainable. That's what you see from the pandemic. Putting aside for a second the people that have succumbed to the virus, which is serious. I'm not playing that down in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Friends of mine have come down with it. But the thing is, we can now begin to see the imprint and the impact that we've had over decades and centuries that is unsustainable. That's the big picture of this moment where we see, yes, we have a chance to change things and make a better world out of this. That's the potential. Now, whether we get there requires a certain level of belief, trust, and also the fact that we need to reach a critical mass in order to achieve that tip over the edge. And I can tell you from what I see around the world, and from the information that I'm privy to in our channeling group, we are that close to hitting a critical mass. And that's really exciting, because I used to be in the media for many years, and I can tell you there is no conspiracy in the media unless you're into the extremes of right and left wing. Okay, any extreme is always going to give you propaganda, but the media tries to sell you a story based on anxiety, because that's what sells. That's what gets people to talk. It's not that they're doing it deliberately. They're just caught up in the moment. They don't see the effect that it's having, unfortunately, because they're so connected to this. But if you just sort of look at this from a point of view of not walking around as much as I do and traveling as much as I do, I mean, I do 64 planes a year. There's my carbon footprint. I'm sorry. But in order to teach, I have to learn. I can't get around.
You have to move around. Yeah.
I wish trains were more available. I really would. I love trains.
But you can't go across the pond on a train, right?
You certainly can't. And I tried to buy a submarine on eBay and it wasn't working. So there you go. I don't like confined spaces. But the point is that there is huge change. And I see a lot of huge positive change. And here's the thing. I think we learned from 500 years of the Inquisition that if you stick your head above the castle wall, someone's going to shoot an arrow at you. So I think we've learned to stay a bit more quiet, work behind the scenes, and live to tell the tale for another day. Be influential behind the scenes. Yes, it's wonderful to be a hero, but you know what? Heroes have a habit of dying. It doesn't always end well for the hero.
Right.
And I admire people who do that, but I'm not one of them. I would rather do it quietly under the scenes. And I can't tell you how many people are doing this behind the scenes that are affecting positive change. So I think there's a lot of good news. And the trick is keep focused on that. You know, by all means, find out what the snakes are doing, because you've got to know what they're doing, to be aware of the big picture. But at the same time, keep your focus on what you want, okay? And for the greater good of all of us, and we're going to make it. We're not that far off of hitting that critical mass. So I feel good about it.
No, I agree. And, you know, I think you can do more by not being in the spotlight, because once you're in the spotlight, like you said, you're a target. Even if it's just paparazzi or whatever, and then you're a target and people try to smear your name to discredit you or whatever, you know, because you're now popular. And if you're behind the scenes and no one knows who you are, you can make a lot more change, I believe. So I agree with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could mention several of my friends who are exceptionally big best-selling authors and friends of mine, and they've got the spotlight on them. And yeah, I feel for them because they get it from all angles. And people are saying, you know, you really should be much more famous than you are. I said, I don't really want to be famous. It's not about me. It's about the work. That's what's important. I gave my life for the work. That's what keeps me motivated. What happens to me is inconsequential. And the thing is, I like being a little bit, I like being second best. You know, it's like Hertz and Avis. I'd rather be Avis because no one pays attention to me. And when they do, they go, oh, that's interesting, or not, we move on. But it means I have time to spend more concentrating on my work than fending off attacks from left, right, and center. And I'm actually quite happy with that.
You know, I was a retail manager for 15 years, and I was taught that very early on. You don't want to be the top guy. Everybody wants to knock the top guy off. So you want to be the second guy or the third guy. And that way you can, if you want to, you can show your colors and show that you're really, really good. But you don't want to be the top guy, because if you are, everybody's gunning for you.
That's right.
Right. And so I realized that then it's
the cognac and go, well, I've already top. I don't have to work so hard. No, I think if you, I mean, I've always enjoyed looking at the biggest mountain when I'm climbing. I go to the second biggest mountain because I can look at the top and go, that's just something to aspire to. It gives me something to aim for, but I'm not going to go and climb it because then I've run out of things to do. I'd rather sit on the lower summit and look up and go, I've done pretty well. This is good enough for me.
Yeah.
And that gives me something to aspire to, you know, but that's just me, you know, that's the way I challenge things.
Well, and I think that's the personality, like we were talking about, that you have and that a lot of us have, to where we don't want to be the superstar. Some people want to be a star, and then when they become a star, they can't handle it because they have too many cameras on them, too many people asking them questions. They can't have no anonymity, right? You can't go out with your friends to a restaurant without people bothering you. So if you're just below that, where you're kind of famous, right, but you're not quite, I think you can make more change because no one's bothering you to try and hassle you to keep you from doing it. So I agree with that, but but I think that we need more people like yourself. I think I think people are starting to get there, right? You know, when we were talking about before, one of the guys I keep watching the chat right next to the camera over here, who I actually know, Bill Van Horn. he actually said, he said free will depends on self-determination. He was agreeing with what you were saying at the time. Without self-determination, there's no growth of consciousness, only future imposition of control, right?
Yeah,
So, but that's true. If you're not, you don't, you have to have that
absolutely.
to strive. That's sort of like the ego that drives us. We have to have that ego that drives us, because if we don't have that, all we have is the chaos, and the chaos doesn't drive you. It just like you were saying, it motivates you, but it doesn't make you determined. So the ego makes you determined by constantly trying to pick your brain and pull you the wrong direction. And maybe that's just my opinion. What do you think?
Well, I mean, ego is just an overarching kind of framework for yourself.
Right.
It's the unbalanced ego that we're discussing here,
Yeah, yeah.
where your unbalanced ego takes you in directions where you become attached to the physical world. You know, I want that
Right.
big car, that big house, that wonderful woman or man. And
Right.
sometimes it works because that's
Right.
what
Right.
your path is. But if it's not your path, soon enough you realize that all of those things meant nothing.
You know what I mean?
And they're going to bring you
Absolutely.
back down. And I've been there. You know, I've absolutely been there. I'm learning as I go. And you realize, perhaps that's not what I wanted. That's what my overdeveloped ego wanted. Now let's look at what my balanced ego wants. Oh, it wants to do this. Okay, I think I'll go and teach for a bit and fly around the
Right.
world and show people another way of doing things based on things that were done by people before us that got it absolutely right, or as close to right as possible. They set a great example. I'm just a channel for them. What do you think? And that's basically what it comes down to. So, and I also watch people who, they buy all the books that aren't nailed to a shelf, and they watch every program on Gaia. They buy all the documentaries. They go to all the conferences. Excuse me. It's not the virus. And
Yeah. All right. Really.
that's why I drink heavily. It's good scotch. And
See that, but that's the cure.
exactly.
So good. I'm sorry.
It cleans the tract. It cleans the tract. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
nothing's going to go in there with scotch. No, and they're still in the same place they were 20 years ago when I saw them. And it's like, well, why are you still coming to my conferences? Because I love what you do, and you give me so much positive things to work on. Yeah, but you're still complaining about the same things you were doing 20 years ago. Self-determination. You have to be the change you wish to see. You have to implement these tools that you're given and move with them. No spaceship or light being or spirit body is going to come down and do it for you. They're saying,
Absolutely.
well, we're here to help. You know, we're giving you the books and everything and the tools, but where are you? You know, you're waiting there, you're sitting there in a chair waiting for the change to happen. It's not going to do anything. The universe doesn't owe us anything. The spirit world owes us nothing.
Right.
Our guides owe us nothing. They're there to help, but you've got to meet them halfway. And when that happens, I tell you, incredible things start happening. They really, really do.
Well, I agree with that, and I tell people that you have to give into that, because you, like you said, you can spend all the or your whole life going to seminars, but if you're not actually understanding what's happening there, and you haven't given into that and realized that, like you just said, there is no, there's no Christ that's going to come back and save us. We're the Savior.
Exactly.
We're the only ones who can save ourselves. So we have to reflect within.
Yeah.
And then figure ourselves out so that we can then figure out the universe. Now, what I want to do is here, a few minutes ago, we had a great segue, but then we went here, but it's still the same. Give some examples. This is because this is like your wheelhouse is everything that we're talking about here anyways, but give some examples for the people who maybe aren't aware, like I talked about before, like, with the structures that were built and how some of these ancient peoples understood what we're discussing now, and you can tell that by the way they built their cities and how they built their structures, whereas, and in comparison to, like you just said, us since maybe the Renaissance till now, we really don't have any of that in our culture, and that's actually very important, right?
Absolutely. The center of every single civilization that's ever existed, going back to the beginning of time, is centered on the temple city. And the temple is the egg. And it dawned me after watching this year after year after year, understanding, sitting back and soaking it all in, that they had something that was absolutely profound, beautiful, and yet elegant and simple. And it was all about harnessing the laws of nature and building them using big rocks. And they basically constructed temples. Basically, first of what they did was to use the power of water. There isn't a temple in the world, not even in the desert, that isn't built on water. Okay, believe it or not, even the pyramids in Egypt are built on top of water underneath them.
Yep.
And that water is potentized. We know because we can measure the energy of this water now. Secondly, they were able to manipulate the Earth's electromagnetic grid, what we call the telluric currents, what the Sioux called a scan. And they moved these lines to where they're going to build a temple. They would anchor them with enormous rocks, using literally the power of their intent to tell the quartz in the rock what to do. They were doing what we do today with computers. You have a computer, it is full of silica. You put an app in there, and the app tells the silica what to do. They just said, well, we don't need that. We have the power of intent, which is an electromagnetic packet, which goes directly to the quartz in the rock, and the rock goes, hey, they're telling me to anchor the energy lines. That's what I'm going to do. That's why these places today, 12,000 years later, are still active, because we go there and we go, I feel different in here. Yeah, you do, because we can now measure the difference of the space outside and inside and realize we're entering a very, very rarefied environment. The laws of physics are subtly different. And that's all you need for your DNA to receive a piece of information that says, I'm going to tell you something that you've been keeping away from you from a long time. It's going to wake you up, or not, depending on whether you want to do it or not. But if you're exposed to it and open to it, that temple will say, how about that for an experience? And I just came back from Egypt 2 weeks ago. We had the entire country to ourselves. It was wonderful. And I'm getting feedback from people in the group. They thought this was one of the best things that I've experienced. And I agree, actually. It was one of the best tours I've ever led, because we had time to focus. We go into the temples, and I say, right, there's parts of the temple that you should go into to find something that will answer the reason why you came on this trip in the first place. And there's a lot of blank faces. They said, really? I said, yeah. What drove you to be on this trip? It wasn't tourism. I don't do tourism. I do something that wakes you up. Whether it's now or in a month, it will happen. And be careful, because your life right now is going to change. So if you like your life right now, you probably don't want to get involved, because it's all going to go 180 degrees and make you into someone else, the person you're supposed to be. And I'll say there are rooms in this temple which are geometrically aligned to the core of the temple, which are designed in a certain geometry to elicit a certain response. And you will get images, voices in the head. You'll start writing things down. You'll have an experience. And from that, the awakening process begins. And that's what I mean about these temples being alive. They're living, breathing organisms. The Egyptians never addressed the temple as a piece of rock. They said, no, the temple is a living, breathing organism. And every morning before dawn, we go into each room of the temple and we sing to the body of this God in stone, and we raise this person from sleep back into the normal day, just like a normal person. And I thought, how elegant. And now we have the technology to measure that every morning, just before sunrise, all the local electricity and the magnetism around every temple in the world is attracted to the site, and it enters the site at dawn at twice the frequency of the surrounding landscape. No one in physics I've talked to can explain that. And it's literally the way that the temple is designed to attract that and become a magnet of energy that then, like, you go in like a piece of blotting paper, you soak it in, and you leave hopefully a bit more energized, even just for a bit of quiet solitude or a bit of introspection or healing. All of those things are totally possible in these places. Even the simplest standing stones will do this to you. And you come out fully changed. And the idea was to send you back into society as a better person, as a reminder of who you really are here. And because you become this mirror to others, others will start seeing that, and then they become that change too. And that's how they elicited change 12,000 years ago and beyond. They created this ability for us to go into these, what I call the self-help centers, when we forgot that we can do it ourselves, that we are the temple. We go into the temple to remind us of our potential, and then we go back into society and remind people, hey, that's not a good way of doing things. How about doing what I'm doing? And that's how society got better and better and more cohesive. And we've lost that. And that's what I'm saying. We need to build more sacred sites. We need to visit more temples and be more attuned to the earth force in order to understand what we're being told and somehow overcome this incredible thing that we're now surrounded with called climate change. The change is upon us.
Right, I agree. And, I try to tell people all the time that when they say, what about history? Who cares about that? And I tell them, you have to understand that the key to our future is our past.
Yeah.
Those people were far more in tune with nature, the sense of the universe and how it works than we are now. We just have technology. That's the only thing that we have that we can say is something great that we did. And even that's subjective. So the truth is, the people who slow down the most and actually start to reflect on things usually then start ascending more than the people that are distracted by things. I had my son over here the other day, and I said, it's baseball playoffs here in the United States. He says, I don't watch baseball. It's too slow. I looked at him and I said, I watch baseball because it's
I kind of agree with him, actually.
Isn't that crazy? I was like, I watch it because it's that slow. And you should too. Haven't you ever heard of the term? As I said to him, slow down and smell the roses.
Yeah.
I said, you can't get a whiff of them if you're doing 100 miles an hour past them.
Yeah.
Right?
It goes back to what you were saying about COVID. We're slowing down. People are beginning as a segment of society that's looking at this and going, wait a minute. I've been so distracted with my smartphone that I'm no longer as smart as my phone. I should be smarter than this. And they realize now I have time to email your friend. In fact, phone your friends. Suddenly people are actually phoning each other again, discovering the joys of speaking and communicating without being on what is it, Twitter? I don't even have
or one of those
180 words, letters or something.
Yeah,
people are slowing down, and you see a change. And some people can't handle it, but some can. And that's part of that change too. Some will make it and some won't. That's part of the cycle of life.
That's just exactly. That's the way it is. And like you were saying before, there are certain things that each of us have to learn on our own. So, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's a saying that's very popular here in America. And it is that way with people, because you can tell them you're going down the wrong path, but until they're willing to admit that to themselves, they're going to continue doing what they're doing. Exactly. And you're right. Some people are just not going to ascend with other people. And that's just the way it is. We all walk our own path. We all walk it at our own pace.
Yeah,
right?
and a good proof of that is try posting something on Facebook, have something, have someone throw it back in your face and try and correct them, and they're just launching this tirade against you, and at which point you just click and delete. It's like you can't help them. No, you're absolutely right, because there are souls being born here from all levels of experience all the time. If you subscribe to this theory, and I do, that you come here to have an experience. There's nothing else to do in the universe but to have an experience.
Correct.
You are the sum of many trillions of experiences, and some people come here with a lot of experience, and they kind of remember the plot as soon as they're out of the womb. Right. And I admire those people, and I'm actually kind of envious of them. Some people get it midway through their lives, and some people never get it. But the point is, we're all in an individual path, having a collective experience. So again, it's circles within circles. Mm-hmm. We are responsible for what we do within society, but ultimately we have to be selfish and say, what have I done for myself? How am I handling my experience? Jones over there is doing this. No, I shouldn't be, because that's Jones's experience. That's not my experience. And that's where we go wrong. We're trying to keep up with people like, Freddy's doing it right. He's flying all around the world. He's got the job I always wanted. Yeah, but you tried to do my job from a logistical point of view of flying in airplanes when you're 6'5". It cost me a fortune to fly business class or economy plus. I'm crunched in seats. I fly a lot. I'm irritated by all this. And then I have to deal with all of these other things like sales, marketing, books, interviews. It's great, but it's bloody hard work, and it's lonely. Right. It's really lonely work. Trying to maintain a relationship with anybody that can understand me, it's very difficult. So don't follow me, because this is my path. And I've learned to live with it, and I found a certain peace with it. But I kind of am envious of other people. And the moment I go, wait a minute, but that's their path. I didn't choose that as a soul. I chose me. And you'd be surprised how much weight comes off your shoulders when you suddenly focus on that moment. It's like, I chose this. I won't know until I die. That's the paradox of living. But I have these tools that I've been given, and I can use the tools to catch myself when I'm starting to go into that negative environment. Keep up with the Joneses, be that person, be this famous author. But that's not me. And I'm very grateful to have had people to teach me that early on, to say, just follow your own path and do the best you can. Fall down once in a while, pick yourself up and learn from the experience. That's the best you can do.
Right. There's a question in the audience that I want to address. Somebody actually is asking, when does the Q&A start? If you guys want to ask questions, please feel free to go ahead and do so. If you're in the Zoom rooms somewhere, you can use the Q&A chat that's down on the bottom. That way we can keep those out of the chat where people are talking. But those of you who are on YouTube or somewhere else on Facebook, you guys may have to go ahead and type in the chat so we can see that there. So if you guys have questions for Freddy, please feel free at this point to go ahead and start asking, and then we can continue with that. So I'm sure they have a bunch.
Yeah, we were doing it 40 minutes ago, but Leonard basically had all the questions.
Right. Well, that's my job, isn't it? My job is to interview.
That was a long question, Leonard.
And you know, I want to see that I'm a fan of yours, and I think like you do. That's why Neil came to me and said, "Do you know who Freddy Silva is?" And I said, "Well, yeah."
You said,
and he was like, "Would you like to interview him?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "I thought so because you guys think a lot alike. You guys are into the same stuff. You know."
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Everything that you're saying is 100% what I talk about on my podcast, and that's why I was like, "Oh, I would love to have you on my podcast, not just here on Portal to Ascension.
Sure.
I'd love to have you on my podcast, which is Orion Rising, and that's esoteric as well. I literally named that because of all of the stuff that's pointing us to the stars are here built on the planet that's trying to tell us, look to the stars to see where we came from and who we are. And you have to do that. The only way you can do that is to look at history and look at all the megaliths and find out about the cultures of the people. And that's everything that you've dedicated your life to. So I'm right behind you going, oh yeah, you go, brother.
Yeah, they left us a huge legacy, and you wonder, why did they build using large rocks? The answer, obviously, is they wanted to make sure the stuff survived until our time. They foresaw that this was going to happen. They knew this was going to happen. We would be up against the wall, and they said, these people need to find out what's going on because we went through this too, and we left the instructions behind. So it was actually a wonderful, romantic, and elegant way of conveying information from a long time ago. And I think this is what's driving people to go to sacred sites more and more each year, whether they realize it or not. But something is rubbing off, and you see people changing.
Well, I think you're right. I think there's a drive. You know, the more that we raise the vibration and we raise the consciousness of the planet as a whole, as a species, I think there are more and more people, like you were saying, more and more people are, I hate to use the term popping off, but in a sense, that's kind of what's happening. They hit that plateau and they kind of wake up, and even if it's in the back of their mind, you know, through osmosis, there's a drive there now where they're interested, where they maybe not have been before. And now all of a sudden, like you said, they're going to these places because they're drawn there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why, but I need to go and see the Great Pyramid. I don't know why, but I need to go to Angkor Wat. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's what people are starting to do, to have that experience, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's truly what we are. We are only all of our experiences.
Exactly.
Each one of us has completely different experiences. And that's what it's about, I think. I think that's ultimately what the entire thing in what our drive is to do, is to experience and learn from that. Am I right?
And each person has its own frequency, and each temple has its own message. So it's a temple. I mean, your subconscious knows better than you can, always. That gut feeling. And when it says, you know, my body needs this right now to be balanced and perfect. Oh, I suddenly need to go to Egypt. Boom. And suddenly you're there. You know, well, why not Peru? Why not England? Why not? Well, because there's something in one of those temples that it's saying, and the temple's already figured it out. It's saying, oh, I've got that. They can hear you. I hear this all the time. It's like, oh yeah, I've heard this person wants to come over here. I'm going to make sure that things are worked out in a certain way. Use the force. We are the droids you're looking for. And bring them to this temple, because I have that. And next year they'll be on to another quest, or not, if they still have things to learn. But I see that all the time, and that's how I learned all this, is by saying, well, why did I want to go there when I have this perfectly beautiful temple called Avebury or Stonehenge, where I used to live right between the two. I was so spoiled when I was writing. And I live in Maine, in America, by the way, where I'm calling from right now. And no, because there was something in somewhere else that had what I needed to become the person that I am. So it's a wonderful relationship. It's like a family that you actually want to spend time with over Christmas. Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm looking at the questions.
I know.
Here's a long one. This is from, who is this person? It's Blue. I was trying to get it to come up. Blue Moon, it looks like it says I can't get it to come up in the chat.
That sounds like
the question is it true that certain heroes of antiquity hurled great stones miles away, such as the legendary White Rock of White Rock, British Columbia, and other stones I have found? Is this superhuman strength?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, a lot of these things are metaphors. A lot of these stories are metaphors, and you have to look beyond the metaphor. And what they were saying is that there was a culture of very tall people about 10,000 years ago. They're still around, by the way, in the Solomon Islands. They still live there. still very alive. There was a culture that was living parallel to humans, and they were much taller, certainly much bigger, 8.5, 9 feet tall. And the idea was that they would plan these things along certain alignments of certain geometric matrices. And the idea was that when these giants hurdled these rocks and they landed where they were, it wasn't because of a physical strength. It was because they're trying to tell you that this culture of tall people place the temples in a certain alignment. And if you follow the alignments, they all have this structure to them. And it's all based on the observation of nature. So that's what it comes down to. So I'm familiar with a lot of those stories, particularly around Scotland. There's, you know, Fingal tossing this massive series of rocks into the middle of the ocean, and the Giant's Causeway and all of this. Yeah. And if you follow the trajectory and link them to the stone circles, they all line up. That's what the story's trying to tell you.
See, now here's some more questions. These are really good questions that are coming in. Can these self-made temples, you were talking about temples that we can make, self-made temples be made in a small space such as an office?
Yeah, in fact, I'm sitting on one right now. Can you see where the temple is? Can you see the big stones? No, you can't. It's very subtle. And I have an energy line running right through my chair, which is the only place in my apartment where I could put my desk. Funny enough that the apartment picked me. No, there's even a case where someone actually said, I have a cupboard that's 3 feet by 5 feet. I need to get away from my wife. Forget the jokes. He actually did want some spaces for himself. He said, can I actually build a space that small? And I said, actually, you can build a space that big, a temple that big. You don't have to walk into it. You can project your consciousness into the temple. Remember, this is just gross matter. It doesn't matter. What's important is what's inside. If you project your consciousness into the space, you can make it the size of a quarter. So space, sizes doesn't matter. Big stones don't matter. I just designed a temple for someone in New York for an apartment, and they use stones about this big, little quartz stones, and they're buried in the bookcases all around the building in a geometrical pattern. So it can be done small and very subtly. So yes, the art of temple making. There's something on my website for you.
So you have to go there. Here's another question that ties into that. With the magnetic pole changing, are the ley lines changing on the planet as a whole?
Now, ley lines are geometric alignments. They're not energy lines. The telluric currents, they are being affected by magnetism.
We Americans have a problem with that. We unfortunately, when they say that, they're saying ley lines, they mean the energy lines. But unfortunately, we over here didn't realize that that's the wrong term. And I've run into that. Hugh Newman and I talked about that. Go ahead.
Everybody does. Believe me, it's a worldwide phenomenon. I don't know who started this. No,
it's over here in America. Somehow over here in America, it got
geometric alignment between 3 or more sites which are connected by form, function, or age. You know, because you got to make a connection. Otherwise, you can make the stuff out of post boxes. But energy currents, they are influenced by human thought, the rotation of the Earth's core, and also the sun's gravitational pull. But here's the twist. They do not affect the sacred sites. Those are anchored forever unless someone destroys everything and really pulls the stuff apart. And still, you'll still have residual energy there because of the intent that's been built up over thousands of years. So, but between the sites, the energy will curve and move unless it's been anchored to the spot. So they are living entities, and you can actually move them according to your willpower.
Right, because you kind of mentioned that before, where people would take and change them to put them where they're going to build something and then anchor them there. So we can move them that way. But now, what if it does change? Say the poles do change and stay. Will the energy lines then re-reference themselves to the new north and south, or do you think they stay the way they were originally?
Oh, they just bend around the landscape. That's all they're doing. They're bending around like serpents around the landscape. It's a subtle thing. They have their own function. They have their own purpose as well. But they just move very subtly, like about 50 or 100 feet. But they are influenced in between the sacred sites due to these natural processes, for sure. And yeah, I mean, we actually, and sometimes when you actually move the line with a group or a person, and I do this remotely as well, which is something I didn't know was even possible or capable. Here I am doing it. We have to, at one point, moved part of the Michael line, which is one of the 2 famous energy lines through England. But we had to ask for consent, and it was because it was going through the house of a particularly influential channeler. She had to move it out of her living room into her stable where she had a little workshop because she couldn't do it in the house anymore. The furniture literally was moving because that line is so powerful. And I've seen this happen. So we actually had to ask permission to move this line, which has its own purpose, just about 50 feet. And I tell you, it was like sticking your head in the microwave oven. We're completely shot for 2 hours and we're drinking water like crazy. So yeah, you can't just move them because you want to. You have to have permission. You got to have a symbiotic relationship, and then they'll only move if they're meant to be moved. So you got to be careful with this stuff.
See, I agree. That's good. Now, there's a couple questions. We're getting down to, we only have a couple minutes left. But the one person said, "How old do you think Chaco Canyon is?" Right.
Well, the canyon is millions of years old.
Right.
The culture that was there, if I can quote Clifford Mahuti, who's my go-to man on these topics, and I love listening to him, a great sense of humor as well. And he says, well, they really were here, the people that were there originally to build the original site, because it's been rebuilt. Yeah. They were the Hizat Sinon. We know them as Anasazi, and they were there just after the Great Flood. So we're talking anywhere between 9,600 to 8,000 BC. And then they moved north and spread out into Betatakin, which is one of their original sites, which is still one of the most beautiful cliff dwelling places in Arizona. Yes, it's still in Arizona.
Yep.
And then the people came back over many thousands of years and rebuilt over time. So it has many, many ages, like so many sacred sites.
Yeah, I agree that, and they didn't. We just had the chief on, I can't remember his name. I'll have to look on the thing he was on yesterday, and he was talking about things that the Indians didn't tell the people in the beginning. Chief Goldenlight, and there was a lot that the natives knew about what's going on that we're starting to figure out. They've known that all along. And they just didn't tell us because, again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. They knew we weren't ready for that. We had to catch up.
It violated the first rule of non-intervention. Know because you are prepared and you're with the plan, but other people have to go through the process in order to learn.
Yeah.
And sometimes the outcome can be changed because of the evolving of consciousness of humanity. So there's another people that I know in New Zealand called the Waitaha, who hardly anyone's ever heard of. I love these people because their stories go back to before the flood. They actually mentioned the gods in the Pacific being overridden by massive waves and reaching New Zealand. I've dated one of their sites to over 14,000 BC. It's an incredible rewriting of the history of that place. And they're saying, actually, we've been around for a very long time and we've had these ideas and premonitions and predictions, but we were not allowed to say it before the arrival of the Maori, which is very recent, by the way, until the arrival of the first white people in New Zealand. And by the time Captain Cook shows up in the region, they said, now we have a 300-year period in which to tell the story. And that period came only, 15, 20 years ago? And they've put the information in writing. And in fact, I put it in my latest book as well, because it was extraordinary. And they said, we had to go through the process of understanding what this is all about. Otherwise, you wouldn't understand the process. If we told you what was going to happen, you go, oh, we can change that. Well, no, you've missed the experience. That's the whole point. We've done it for you. We've made it very easy. And that's the law of non-intervention. And any Star Trek fans will know this. It's called the Prime Directive.
Right, the Prime Directive. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of our hour here. So why don't you tell people where they can find your books, whether your website is, and if you have anything up and coming that you're going to be doing that you want them to know about so they can tune in.
Oh, God, yes. Invisibletemple.com is where you'll find everything. Please don't support that online bookstore. It's putting us all out of business. It really is. My tour dates are there. We've got something coming up in Sedona. I've got a private gig in Sedona coming up in early November. Is it early November? No, mid-November. So that's going to be fun. A trip to the Yucatan is planned. We just came back from Egypt. We're the first people in there. We had a blast. I'm hoping to repeat that in the Yucatan at the end of January. So all my tours are on there. You can contact me for information, consulting on Sacred Site. You're going to be there for a long, long time. And the best part, it's cheaper than Netflix. It's free.